how the workday is being redefined.
Measuring productivity and effectiveness is more important than determining how long somebody is in the office.
Why do you think some firms are still keen to kind of keep this 9 to 5 routine?
There's a reason why those leaders have gotten to the top of the organization. They work long and hard.
A right to disconnect bill. Do you think this is pushing things too far?
It can work against everybody's interests. Long as you don't call me Margie, life is good.
Who are you emailing at this hour?
Just letting one of my direct reports know about our new delivery schedule.
Kind of late, don't you think?
Nah, it's just an email. He doesn't have to answer it.
Open up! This is the police!
Huh? Stay here, honey. They must have the wrong house. Can I help you, officer?
Sir, you're under arrest.
For what?
You violated Penal Code 575-68921, Section A, an employee's right to disconnect after work hours. I'm gonna have to take you downtown.
What? Right to disconnect? What about my rights?
Oh, you do have a right. The right to remain silent.
Hi, I'm Jill Wiltfong, Chief Marketing Officer for Korn Ferry, and this is Briefings, our deep dive into topics that corporate leaders need to care about. 9 to 5 days a week was once synonymous with how well we all worked. But have you seen what's happening to work boundaries? A recent survey found that workers are now logging off an hour earlier than they did in 2021, leaving on average, for example, at 4:03 on Fridays. And workers are getting serious after they leave work about shutting down their laptops. From Australia to Belgium and in the state of California, governments have launched or are planning to launch laws guaranteeing workers the right to disconnect from their employers. And if a manager starts texting during non-business hours, well, they could be fined. You combine all that with the recent fact that the 4-day work week continues to gain momentum in places like the UK and New Zealand, and wow, you can start to see how things are shifting. Where will it all end? What do firm leaders think about this? Well, let's talk to some experts about how the workday is being redefined. Before we start, if you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on this topic. So let's jump in. We're now joined by Ron Porter, a Korn Ferry Senior Client Partner in our Global Human Resource Center of Excellence, and Korn Ferry Vice Chairman Joe McCabe. Both these guys have spent years in the trenches with senior HR leaders, so they know firsthand the challenges that companies face trying to define their work days. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me and us.
You bet. So Ron, let me start with you. Leaving an extra hour earlier from work may not sound like such a big deal, but many people are already working remotely half the week as it is. So it almost seems like working hours are kind of slipping away faster than sand in an hourglass. What is happening to the workday?
From a positive perspective, technology has allowed people to work throughout, kind of when they want to in many ways. So somebody may be on looking at emails at 7 p.m. and being productive. And so leaving early, now assuming that's not disrupting team meetings and those kinds of things, I would say going back to measuring productivity and effectiveness is more important than determining how long somebody is in the office or at their desk.
Joe, let me turn this around to you a little bit here. Productivity in the U.S. increased 3.2% in the fourth quarter of last year, compared with 2.6% for the same period a year ago. Given these seemingly positive numbers, why do you think some firms are still keen to kind of keep this 9 to 5 routine or 5-day work week? What's holding them back?
It's interesting, Joe. It's a fascinating study in human behavior, and candidly, what it gets down to, individuals don't like change, and that's why I think you're seeing certain organizations migrate back toward a 5-day a week in the office. Some are still, the majority have much more flexibility than what they did prior to COVID, but it's still some degree of flexibility out there is required. However, the caveat is it is industry specific. There's roles, naturally customer service roles, manufacturing, you've got to be there. Aerospace defense industry, you've got to be there.
Now, some people will cut back on their work hours, but are they really separated from work?
This is where this can totally go wrong. Maybe you go down to part-time, you take a big cut to your pay, and still every Friday you're logging on because you have demands from clients or coworkers that you just feel pressure to respond to. There's also the sense, I think, that you miss out on promotions, you miss out on key company decisions. It can be really hard to make this work.
That's the Wall Street Journal's J.R. Whalen and Rachel Feinzig talking about some of the hidden drawbacks that workers can face when cutting their workday or work week, no matter how hard they perform. Joe, if you're an executive rising up the ranks, can you really afford to work less time? Don't the bosses still essentially hold all the cards in terms of promotions and raises and use that as a benchmark?
We see it every day with the nature of Korn Ferry and the senior executives that we work with and we place, and we help organizations understand who those best performers are. There is no doubt there's a common thread in there, despite the individual variances there. There's a work ethic there that there's a reason why those leaders have gotten to the top of the organization. They work long and hard.
Ron, there's talk of some companies possibly creating a new HR role, a so-called hours czar, if you will, whose job is to figure out details like hours, benefits, promotions, eligibility for part-time work. Do you think that's a role that more companies should seriously consider adding? Or is this shorter workday discussion really better left between employees and managers and more one-to-one?
It's hard to imagine that role would be effective for most organizations. I think the key would be is to make sure you've got the right people at the manager level and that they're properly trained and know how to manage and lead their team and know when to make exceptions and how to balance that with the rest of the workforce that perhaps is having to cover for that person who needed an exception on that moment or that day.
What did your research find with this 4-day work week?
Well, the findings have been pretty remarkable. Across the board, we find that companies are doing really well, and for many, many well-being outcomes, workers are much better off. We're talking stress, burnout, physical health, mental health, fatigue, exercise, sleep, work-family conflict, satisfaction, you name it. Big and statistically significant improvements in all of those things for workers. At the same time, the companies are seeing better revenue, lower absenteeism, less quitting, and good productivity.
That's Juliet Shore, an economist and socialist at Boston College, talking about a study she led out of the UK on the 4-day work week. Ron, I understand you have some experience having implemented a 4-day work week in the past. Talk a little bit about how that went.
Well, years ago, we implemented a 4-day work week when I was at PepsiCo. We had a team of route drivers, and their work, or route salesmen, I should say, their work allowed them to be able to work 4x10 versus 5x8 to give them a day off. The issue that no one really had anticipated, to include the route sales guys, was the fact that with that extra day, they tended to spend more money. So when it was all said and done, they wanted to go back to the 5-day work week, in which we did. So would have never guessed it was a way to control their spending, in effect.
Joe, how about a prediction on this one from you? Is the 4-day work week coming to a company near you anytime soon, or do you think it's going to remain kind of a niche idea for some time to come?
It's going to be a niche idea for a long time coming, Joe. I just don't, when the day is done, organizations and businesses have a business model, and you've got to deliver on that. And no different than if, in a retail organization, if you want to go do something on a Friday to go and they said, I'm sorry, we're closed on a Friday, that's not acceptable.
All right, so I will not book out my Friday just yet, but it does sound like something that we'll have to keep an eye out on. And from a company perspective, it's a case by case, right? The devil's in the details. Both of you, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Had fun.
When we come back from the break, we'll continue down the rabbit hole of the evolving workday as we discuss the recent push for the right to disconnect from work. So stay tuned.
Hi, and welcome to This Week in Leadership. I'm Rupak Bhattacharya, and here's a quick look at what else is happening in business.
Sometimes a company's dividend might indicate that it's failing to reinvest in the growth of its business.
S&P 500 firms increased net dividend payments in the first quarter to $16 billion. That's 60% more than the same period last year. It's seen as a means of generating shareholder goodwill, but critics argued the extra cash could go into more strategic moves that would ultimately serve more stakeholders.
We're seeing something called rage applying.
2/3 of U.S. professionals admitted to so-called rage applying last year. It's a relatively new trend where workers fed up with their current job apply to jobs they often have no intention of accepting, creating frustrations for hiring professionals.
The hardest question to answer in a job interview is...
In a fresh approach to hiring, some companies are now providing interview questions in advance by publishing them online. Experts say this may help level the applicant playing field, but firms should still find ways to determine whether applicants can think on their feet. For more insights on business and leadership, head to kornferry.com/insights. Now back to Jill and our episode, Workday Redefined.
For many people, they have no time at all to disconnect or to rest. They're expected to respond to these emails and texts 24 hours a day, even when they're at dinner with their family or at their kid's birthday. And we need to update our laws to be able to clarify a bit better when people are working and when they do not have to. And so the right to disconnect, which exists in over a dozen countries around the world, France, Ireland, Australia, is a way that we can really update our laws so that there's just more clarity.
With us now is Margie Worrell, a Korn Ferry senior client partner and leadership expert. Margie, glad you're here.
Great to be with you, Jill.
That last clip featured California Assembly member Matt Haney. He recently proposed a right to disconnect bill that was inspired by your native Australia, which is set to roll out a similar law later this year. So Margie, we talked in the first half about how workers are increasingly keen on more part-time work and 4-day work weeks. Now this latest bill could further reduce the hours that people are currently working. Do you think this is pushing things too far?
Given it's California, I would say maybe so. You only have to think about how many big companies, Oracle, Hewlett-Packard, Tesla, etc., have shipped out of California, their head office, because they feel that it is a better business climate to be operating out of Texas or elsewhere. Legislatures have to ask themselves, are we setting ourselves up for our state, our country to thrive with whatever rules we're putting in place?
While it's definitely true that more than half of workers say they respond to work messages outside of normal hours, what are your thoughts on firms kind of being forced to set strict communication hours for employees? Would that hamper the kind of flexibility that many workers currently enjoy? For example, sometimes it might be easier, right, to send out emails at night if you had to handle a bunch of unexpected issues during the day. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's always an implicit and explicit contract that you have with your employer. And I think whenever we get too rigid, it can work against everybody's interests. I know myself as a mum, as a woman, I love flexibility. And sometimes we want to do some things during the day and we're happy to be answering emails at 9:00 at night. So I think when you create too much regulation around things, it actually can be very counterproductive.
You should be dreaming about me, baby. I should be on your mind constantly. My agent should be thinking Rod Tidwell. That's when the big dollars are gonna flow. That's when we truly will materialize the Quan.
You talk too much.
No. Talking is only a primitive form of communication.
It's fun talking to you. Bye, Rod.
Jerry!
That was a clip from Jerry Maguire starring Tom Cruise, where sports agent Jerry declines to pick up the phone from his football player client. Margie, it's one thing to disconnect from your boss, but let's get real here. Do you think it'll ever be possible for workers to disconnect from clients?
Well, not if you want to stay competitive and in business. I mean, if you don't really care, sure, just don't pick up the phone. And let's face it, Jill, that was the movies. And that was Jerry Maguire. I'm always going to be very client focused in making sure they feel really cared for. And if there's something that needs tending to at 8:00 at night or on a Sunday afternoon ahead of a Monday morning meeting, that's going to get attention.
Let's make it a little personal for people. Would you give your direct reports the right to disconnect? What would you do?
Look, I think like anybody who's reasonable, everyone who works for us, with us, has the right to have unplugged time and not to feel like they have to be available all of the time. That said, sometimes things come up and sometimes we have to reach out to someone out of hours. And when we do that, obviously it's not because we want to create stress for them or we're disrespecting them. Actually, that can actually save stress in the longer term.
Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure, Jill.
The executive producer of Briefings is Jonathan Dahl. Today's episode was produced by Rupak Bhattacharya, Nadira Putri, and Teresa Allen, and it was edited by Jaron Henry McRae. It contains reporting by Russell Perlman, Ariane Cohen, and Peter Loria. Our video segment contains original artwork by Fraser Milton, Haley Kennel, Jonathan Pink, and Sasha Kotschik. Don't forget to read our magazine, available at newsstands and at kornferry.com/briefings. That's it for Korn Ferry Briefings. I'm Jill Wiltfong. See you next time. We toss this to Ron as well. I feel like we haven't talked to Joe in a while.
Not for good reason. He's got bad answers.